because I feel good about what my characters have been able to accomplish. They've gone through the fire, they've come out on the other side. I love that for them. This is what I wanted for them, and they got what they wanted.
Hey there, and welcome to the Your Creative Mind podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I am super excited to introduce you to this week's guest. Susan Sloate is a storyteller who proves that writing isn't just about words on a page. It's about shaping how we live and what we carry forward. Susan's written novels, musicals, and you know that's close to my heart, and even an autobiographical love story. And they're all rooted in her belief that happy endings matter because they help us hold on to hope. So, in our conversation, we're going to talk about how to turn creative obstacles into some surprising breakthroughs, why outrageous choices can open the best paths forward, and how living fully really fuels writing that resonates. And you know, that's catnip to me too. So, if you've ever felt stuck at the page or wondered how to build more joy and confidence into your creative life, I think Susan's insights are going to give you both inspiration and practical tools that you can use today and every day. Susan, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here, Isolde.
I want to really jump on something immediately on something that you've said, and I love this because I'm a romantic at heart, but it also kind of makes me go, it bears more thinking about. You've said stories should end happily because readers need to walk away with something valuable. And so I want to just jump in and go, how does writing toward hope change you as a storyteller?
That is a fabulous question. And you'll be pleased to know that in over 20 years of talking about this, no one has ever asked me that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I want to start by saying that I believe all stories should end happily because I believe all stories ultimately do end happily.
Mm,
Okay. It is Ernest Hemingway, I think, who said that all true stories end in death. That is not true. The story is not over when someone dies. We
mm.
just don't know what's on the other side. That's the entire point. But the thing is, as far as changing me, I would say what it does when I write the end, and my end has been a situation where people have been brought together and characters have gotten what they wanted and everything has changed for the better. On some level, it makes me a happier person, and forgive me for putting it this way, but probably a better person because I'm happier, because I feel good about what my characters have been able to accomplish. They've gone through the fire, they've come out on the other side. I love that for them. This is what I wanted for them, and they got what they wanted. That part is important to me.
I really love that actually because there's a saying that my dear friend Elisa Levine, who's a scientist at NASA, when I worked there, she was my boss. She quoted something to me, and I don't know where it's from, but she said this. She said, "It's all going to be okay in the end, and if it's not okay, it's not the end."
I
And
agree. That's totally true. Totally.
and
In
I
fact, a guy that I know used to have a saying, I was in a network marketing business years ago, and he used to say, the game's not over until I win. And I think it's more or less the same thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me as wordsmiths, as storytellers, as people who try to write or tell stories that will engage others. We have a certain responsibility to people, I think, to our readers, to our listeners. So I'd love it if you would talk to me a little bit about what surprises you when you do talk about this sort of this way of looking hopefully towards the future, towards the present and the past, even because of lessons we've learned. What lessons are you learning as you continue on your journey as a storyteller of hope?
The storyteller of hope part, I'm not sure how many lessons I'm taking from that, except that I'm the world's biggest Pollyanna anyway. And I always see the bright side in everything. I always see that out of every bad, there's going to come a good, and I know it's going to come sooner rather than later. um, Lessons from that is one thing, but as far as the individual lessons that I get from the stories that I tell, those really come from the writing process. So it's like sometimes for example, I'll write a mystery and I'll realize at the end I've learned how to do X or I've learned how to do Y in the writing process as a result of having to write that mystery or choosing to write that mystery. That kind of thing comes along. As far as building in more hope and whatever, that's really so much a part of my DNA. It's extremely difficult for me to parse out and
Mm.
give you specifics on that.
Yeah, and I get that and I appreciate that so much. I would like to I'm pretty hopeful and optimistic, but I don't think I'm on the same level as you, that's for sure. But there's something that's interesting that you said to me about the writing process. For example, I just handed in a story that I was asked to be part of an anthology, and the deadline was this Monday, and I knew about it for months, and for some reason I couldn't get my head or heart around what the story was going to be. It's a crime fiction anthology, and
Ah,
what's interesting about it, and I write mysteries, I write thrillers, and I love it, love it, love it. But what was interesting to me is I realized that I was in a situation where I had to really let it percolate. I had to keep thinking about the story and then letting my subconscious work on what the story was going to be. And I didn't finish writing it until the deadline day, until Monday. So it's taught me something about how I am as a writer. Can you talk a little bit about, you said your writing process. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like for you? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Are you approaching your stories as a daily sort of routine? I'm going to sit down for 1,000 words a day. What do you do in order to keep filling that creative well so that you can create the things that your readers want to read?
well, you're bringing up something that's near and dear to my heart, which is writer's procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
I am convinced that this is something that writers have their own special type of procrastination. And in fact, what you were talking about, I was chuckling while you were talking about your crime anthology that you hadn't gotten until that last day. I actually wrote a book in 3 days under severe deadline pressure, and I didn't finish it until 30 minutes before I got on the train to take it physically to my editor in New York.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't get a lot closer to deadline than that. It's pretty much it. And the real reason that that particular thing happened was because I was being asked to write something I didn't know anything about.
Mm,
And I was writing under contract a girls' series fiction, and I had written two books for them before. They liked it very much. I was writing the same main character again, but the situation at this point was this was a girl who was raising a calf for a 4-H fair. Okay.
mm-hmm.
Now, I know absolutely nothing about raising a calf for a 4-H fair. I mean, this was just so far out of my wheelhouse, but it was part of what I was supposed to do. And I was like, okay, I've already done two. I'm going to do a third. That's fine. So I went ahead and did it. And my plan was, go to the library. This is back in the 90s, you remember, before the internet kids. And yes, I was going to go to the library. I was going to do all the research. I was going to get it done. I never got around to doing it. And finally, I had 3 days left. And I had to get on this train on this particular day. And I had to take this to my editor. And I had no time.
Mm,
So I thought, okay, my character is a girl who wants to be an actress. She reads her horoscopes every day. She's not at all into farming or raising animals or anything like that. So she's as foreign to this as I am. So I'm going to make the whole thing up. I'm going to act like she doesn't know what she's doing because she doesn't know what she's doing.
mm,
So I had her get the calf and the assignment and all this other kind of thing. And she had to try to figure out what she was going to do. And what she decided to do was she was going to train the calf to do certain things that she had to do for the competition by teaching her through songs. She sang Beatles songs to her, she sang Petula Clark to her, and each thing taught the calf how to do a different thing. And the calf did really, really well in the 4-H fair. Now, what's funny about this is I didn't reread this book for about 30 years because I was just like, this is so dreadful, so awful. But what happened was, is 3 weeks after I turned in this book, one draft, no changes, no options, print it out, get it in my lap, go to New York. Um, I got a call from the editor that I worked with at Western Publishing. And she said, I just want you to know something important. I said, yeah. She said, we really liked the other two books that you did for us. But at the highest levels of Western publishing, we loved this book. We just loved this book. I never told her. I mean, what was it going to do her blood pressure any good to know that I wrote it in 3 days? I doubt it very much. So I was thrilled and it was great. Um, as far as my process is concerned, my process changes. I would love to be that person that sits down and writes 1,000 words a day. I would love it. But the only time that I actually do that has been in November. November being the month that NaNoWriMo used to be taking place. I don't know that this is something that you're familiar with, but if not, I can certainly discuss it with you for the audience. Is that helpful?
I know NaNoWriMo. I've done NaNoWriMo. It's National Novel Writing Month. If you don't know
Right.
what it is and you're listening to it, no, you don't need to discuss NaNoWriMo. I talk about it quite often. So please keep going with your
Okay.
story. Hmm.
Okay. Anyway, point is that NaNoWriMo has one of the best things about it is you don't have a lot of time to think. And I know that you know this, Isolde. If you've done this before, then you know what it's like to try to hit 1,700 words a day. If you're not used to doing it, that can really, really push you. And so in my case, I do everything possible to avoid writing throughout the year. Now, I don't exclusively do NaNoWriMo, and that's the only writing I do during the year. I do other stuff, and there have been times I actually published 3 books in one year, so obviously that wasn't the only time. But this in 2018, I was inspired to write a book for NaNoWriMo based on a YouTube clip of Paul McCartney, which is really interesting. And I sat down to write it. And when you're writing, it's like you said, you let a lot of stuff percolate, and a lot of stuff comes from your subconscious that you did not know you were going to write about. And so what happened was is I actually did this particular book starting from day one, page one, and straight through. And at the end of 30 days, I did have 50,000 words, but I had not actually finished the first draft of the book, which I did finish before the end of the year in 2018. I mean, I finished it 6 hours before the end of the year in 2018, but I did finish it in 2018. And then I put it away. And I finally asked a friend of mine who was sort of a real fan of my writing. She just loved everything I wrote. I said, would you mind reading something that I haven't published yet? She said, oh, I'd love to. So I handed it to her. And she called me on a Sunday night and she said, I just finished your book and I cried so hard reading it. And I said, I am so grateful you told me that because while I was writing it, there were times I was crying so hard I couldn't see the keyboard. And I thought it was just me. And she was the first person to have read the book. And then other people read it and they recorded the same response. Everybody was reading it, everybody was crying. Last week, I had a friend who is a Marine, rough, tough Marine, who read the book, said he started misting up at page 28. By page 58, he couldn't stop crying. I was like, okay, I guess I have something here. And it was one of those things where process became what came out of my subconscious during that period where I was just sitting down every day. And the hardest thing for me at NaNoWriMo is writing forward. You know, I'm one of those people that when I wrote my love story, Stealing Fire, I was writing in patches. I would say, okay, I can write this today because I feel like I know this scene, or I can write this scene today. And then I would tell myself, well, I'll put it together later. So I would just write a scene as I wanted to and leave it alone. And interestingly enough, I feel like the writing was better because I was writing at a place where I felt a certain amount of confidence that I knew what the scene was about. So that is still, on some level, my favorite method of writing,
Mm.
which is writing the scene and then going forward and then writing another scene. And that's actually how I'm writing a musical right now. You would think you start at fade in and then you would just go on to fade out, but that's not how it seems to be working. It's like, okay, I feel good about this scene, so I'm going to write this scene. And I feel good about that scene, so I'm going to write that scene. And oh, I think I know enough about this that I can do this today. And it sounds stupid, but it's helpful. You know, the hardest thing for me in writing anything is the bleepity bleepy bleeping middle, which drives me literally insane. And so if you can avoid that, if you can avoid that straight through the process, and then you hit this, and then you hit that, and then you hit that, then you're going to do better. At least from my point of view, you're going to do better. So that is how I've been trying to do most of my writing recently, which is basically find the places where I feel confident and write in those places, and then walk away, stand back, put it together. When I finally got around to putting Stealing Fire together, it took me a full day to actually move everything around and do what I was trying to do. But it was worth it because I really had put together the scenes. The scenes were so strong that it was a fairly easy process to be able to move them around to where I felt they really belonged. And there wasn't a lot of change after I did it because I had somehow over the years that I was writing it found a way um, to make it seem as though time was passing in some places and not passing in other places. It was just, it made it somehow easier. I don't really understand that. But that, I'm going to write 1,000 words a day kind of thing, not really. I've had NaNoWriMos where I started late for a number of reasons. I remember having my highest word count ever in one NaNoWriMo. I had 8,000 words in one day.
Wow.
I don't expect that to happen very often, but when you can, it's great.
Right.
It's, yeah, I mean, you know what it feels like that moment when it's like, I know what I'm doing now. I know what to do and I know what comes next. And I mean, that is the best feeling in this world. It's just the best. And there's no high like it really. But that's what I go for is trying to get to that high. And I can't say it's always going to happen, but I'm writing something that I care about, and so I'm at least going to have fun with it, even if I don't get high from it. I
Yeah,
don't.
I wouldn't want to chase that dragon all the time. It would be an exercise in frustration for me. What's
Oh yeah.
interesting to me about what you're saying, though, is first of all, I want to go back and say teaching a calf through music for me as a vegan, I'm going, that just shows how incredibly intelligent cows are. So please remember that. Not you, Susan, but the general audience. The other interesting thing that sort of struck me as you were talking about it, this notion, as you said, of a high and sort of knowing, feeling confident about what it is you're saying. I'd love for you to sort of discuss that a little bit more if you don't mind, because you're writing a musical and I want to definitely talk about that too because I'm currently writing a musical myself.
Oh my.
Yeah, it's there's no project like writing a musical. That is for darn sure.
Yeah.
But you've written novels, writing a musical, screenplays. When you're in that I know what I'm doing place, do you have something that translates universally across all those formats, no matter the medium, or is everything so different that it just aligns with different parts of who you are as you're creating it?
I think if I were going to compare this to anything, the best way to do that is to compare it to speaking a different language.
Hmm.
When you are, well, the nice thing is you're multilingual, so I can say this to you. This is helpful. When you are here, let's say in Brooklyn, at home, you can talk to someone, and the automatic default language for you is going to be English, almost certainly, unless you're speaking to someone else who speaks another language and you speak that too. But when you are in another country, when you get there, you land, get off the plane, it's almost like you go immediately into this default thing of being this person who knows this other language. And so when you're going from project to project as I have before, I have, yes, written screenplays, stage plays. I'm now working on a musical. I've written sports articles. I've written feature magazine articles. All of that is you sort of have to sit down and remind yourself, oh, okay, I know how to do this. Okay, fade in, exterior, house, day. And you have to remind yourself, hey, this is what it's like. And it's like anything else, you pick it up again. Now to me, the default easy thing is writing prose because I'm used to doing that. And so you sit down, you start your story and you start telling it in sentences and in the language that you're used to telling it. There's no translation required. I know that there are also people that, for example, mostly write screenplays or mostly write stage plays. And for them, that is their default. That is what they're used to doing. And so that's how they think. But that is not my default. My default is really novel writing, prose writing. It's just the easiest thing I have found. And it's the one that I translate from in my mind when I am writing another medium. That seems to be the best way to do it.
Hmm. That's so interesting to me because for me, for example, that's not, I write movies in my head, I guess I would say, and I've written screenplays, I've written novels, I've written plays. The musical is kicking my butt, but that has nothing to do with the writing process, it has to do with, as a musician, I'm kind of being hard on myself with my melodies. But when you're talking about this, these are some, like when you're talking about the language, for example, and shifting perspective on who we are in the moment. For me, I do that with, if I'm facing a blank page, no matter what I'm creating, and I have no idea what to say, I ask myself this question: if I were someone who knew what to say right now, what would it be? And it just takes me right out of the not knowing and puts me into, well, what if I were someone who knew what was going on? What would I say? And that gets me started, right? No matter
That's
what happens.
that's brilliant. I love
Uh,
that.
Thank you. Yeah, I teach writing in schools and in colleges, and that has helped so many people start their writing projects because you take yourself and your own sort of sense of uncertainty out of it. So I consider that kind of a bizarre solution to things, but it works for me. And you've said that you've had some outrageous solutions that you've had to break you out of some of those creative corners. Can you talk about a specific moment when that worked and
Yes.
what people can borrow from their own project for their own projects as part of this?
It's interesting. I've been talking about this recently on other podcasts, and what I find is, in one of the books I wrote a few years ago, I reached a moment where it was a mystery, and mysteries for me are hard because the hard plotting part of it, the clues and how you find things and all this other
Mm,
stuff, that part is hard for me. I know for somebody like you, it's probably less hard because you do more of it, but
don't
it's
don't count on that.
oh, okay. Well, thank you. That makes me feel better. Um, what I have discovered was we got to a place where the detective, who happened to be a high schooler, um, was faced with a situation where he had to do something outrageous in order to bring um, in order to bait the hook and bring the bad guys out in the open. And so he actually did what I think of as the most outrageous thing he could do, because part of the book was actually about a person who created a gamer who developed his own games,
Mm,
okay, who
hmm.
was very, very famous and everybody loved his games and everything he did always sold out and all this kind of thing. And the whole point was no one knew who he was. And so my guy, I said, what do I do with this? Here I am stuck. And then all of a sudden, the thought rose in my mind, have him pretend to be the game developer. And I thought, that's pretty outrageous. So he called the editor of his high school paper and said, I will give you a worldwide exclusive if you publish it tomorrow. And she said, why are you giving it to me? Why aren't you giving it to the New York Times? He said, because it matters more here than it will to them. So
Mm.
she agreed. And when he told her, I know who this game developer is, she said, how do you know? He said, because it's me. And I'm telling you, that changed everything. It changed everything in the book. It changed everything in my ability to finish it. It was that moment when I hit rock bottom and I literally didn't know what else to do. And what I tell people to do is literally the most outrageous thing you can think of to do. That's what you should do, whatever that might be. In this case, it was pretending to be the game developer, um, which in fact led to some very, very, very good results. Also, almost led to my teenage detective being killed, but that's another story.
Yikes.
With this, it's a series, so he couldn't die in the first book, so that all worked out. But but the main thing, like I say, is the being outrageous. What is, I think, the question I would ask myself if you get to that moment where you just don't know how to move and you feel like you've painted yourself into a corner, what's the most outrageous thing I can do here? And in fact, I've got a wonderful story that I tell people when you talk about being outrageous. Every time I even think of this, it makes me laugh. Many, many years ago, I know you know this, there were a lot of writers who made their living writing serials for magazines. This is back in the days when they would publish a chapter a week or something, and you'd have to buy the magazine to find out what happened next. And many, many people were doing very, very well writing these things. And in fact, if you want to go back that far, Charles Dickens, that's actually how he made his living for a long time. Um, Anyway, point is that there was a an American magazine writer who his name was Richard Harding Davis, and he was a serial writer for some of the New York magazines, and he had written a an adventure story in which his hero had fallen down a dry well in Africa somewhere. And there was no one above him who knew he had fallen. There was no one literally there who could pull him up. There was no ladder. There were no tools. There was the sides of the well were smooth, and there was nothing he could do. And right at the moment that this all happened, that he turned in this last chapter, he got into a magazine, a dispute on finances, on salary with the magazine, and said, "I'm not writing for you anymore." And they said, "Heck with you, we'll bring somebody else in to fix this." But no writer they brought in could fix the story. Absolutely nobody.
Huh.
And so they had to come to terms with Richard Harding Davis. So they did. And he says, "Okay, I'll do it." And he sends in his next chapter, and they just about kill each other trying to open up the thing so they can read what he says. And they open up the thing and they look at the manuscript, and it says, "Once out of the well." And I thought, wow, now that is ballsy. That really is.
Oh my
You know,
goodness.
I know. I really admired that. I was like, you literally painted yourself into a place you can't get out of. That's how you do it. I was very impressed. I was. I've never used it yet, but I'm still trying to find outrageous things to do. But the outrageousness of it to me, it really appealed to me. I really loved that.
I love it. It reminds me of that old story about NASA where I worked for many years, but they were trying to come up with a way to use a ballpoint pen in space. And
Oh
it was
yeah.
impossible because you need, and then the Soviets used the pencil. And I
Mm,
kind of
yes,
went, when you hear that, you kind of go, oh,
I
yeah,
know.
that's it. So, and it's fascinating to me that you then leave it up to the reader's imagination how he got out. Nowadays, though, one of the things that I've noticed in writing plays is people go, well, now I want to know more about this, what happened to this character later.
Mm.
And I go, I get that, but that's not the story I was telling. So when that happens to you, when people want to know more than you've written, what's your answer to them?
There are certain things that the story stands where it is, and there's not much you can do about it. Especially if you have one of those sagas where half the characters die. It's
Mm,
like, there's really not much we can do about that. On the other hand, when I wrote Forward to Camelot, the plan was it was a one-off book. It was just going to be this book about the JFK assassination, and my heroine was going to come back. She's going to have accomplished her mission, and there we are. But as it happened, I kept thinking about her. It wasn't someone else, it was me. I kept thinking about her and finally realized I wasn't done with her.
mm,
And so what I did was I started a sequel. And the sequel deals with this woman who's just had a life-changing experience, traveling through time, has helped to save Kennedy from assassination in Dallas. That's spoiler alert. Yeah. But it's literally on the front cover of the book, where were you the day Kennedy was saved? So I'm not, telling tales out of school here. Anyway, point is that I started writing about her coming back and resuming her real life, only her real life has changed dramatically since that time. And the story picks up again when she is finished with a movie she's just made, in which they've adapted a uh, an old nonfiction book about this period of time when Kennedy was saved in Dallas and who saved him and all this other kind of thing. And interestingly enough, she's playing a character that certain people told the reporter writing the book they had seen this woman traveling around Dallas, and she's literally playing herself. Okay. Only
hmm.
she doesn't really, obviously, you don't want to talk about that because that makes you nuts to begin with. And it's frightening to imagine what else they might uncover that she doesn't want known. So she doesn't want to talk about it. So her agent says to her, "I'll tell you what, we're going to get you on television and you're not going to have to talk about this movie. You're not going to have to talk about, promoting this or anything like that. They're just going to get to know you and they're going to like you. We're going to put you on a live television ballroom dance competition and they're going to get to know you week by week." And she doesn't want to do this, doesn't want to be involved in reality TV, doesn't want nothing, but she watches the show. She thinks it's fabulous. She gets involved. And then she finds out that people on the show that she's on right now are being murdered. Why? Because of something that happened that changed in time between the past and the current present, and how things may have been different. And someone is killing a lot of people involved with that, and she has to get involved. And so it was one of those things where I couldn't literally stop thinking about her. And for that reason, I ended up getting into another adventure with her.
That makes all sorts of sense too. I mean, from a storytelling perspective, if you do something as big as save a president from assassination, of course there are going to be other ripples, right? In ways you've
Oh,
changed
yeah,
the timeline.
of
So
course.
so that makes all sorts of sense to me. And it also makes sense that to sort of put the punctuation point on it, that it falls to her to fix what went wrong when she righted a potential wrong, but created other wrongs as a result. So I think that
Yes.
it's, to me, that's really fascinating, and I love the notion that I'm not done with you, and I've done that. For example, somebody asked me to write a short story, and I love the short story so much, and it opens up a world. And I've written short stories and gone, I really don't want to submit this to this anthology. It's going to be the beginning to the next book series I'm going to write. And I've done that, right? I have a
Oh,
true crime podcaster I'm in the middle of writing that book. And originally she was supposed to be part of an anthology. And I went, nope, Gemma's going to be her own thing, and did not submit it because there was much more story to tell than the 5,000 words I'd written. So we as writers, as storytellers, have to know ourselves well enough. And I would love to ask you about that part of it. You know yourself pretty well, but you're writing, and in some ways I think you're kind of like I am, in that we have our fingers in a lot of different storytelling pies.
yes.
So talk to me about, for example, scenes from a song. How similar versus different is it from the other writer you are when you're writing some of the other kinds of things, other genres, other media that you write?
Scenes from a Song is, as we were talking about just a minute ago, Scenes from a Song is a one-off story for openers. But it's also, interestingly enough, probably has more of my subconscious in it
Hmm.
than most of the other stuff I've written, because I sit down consciously to write the screenplays, to write the stage plays, to all that stuff. This one, again, being written for NaNoWriMo, was one of those things where I had to just allow my subconscious to kind of take over at times and tell the story. And what I realized was there, Scenes from a Song is a very unusual story. In fact, it's one of those things where when I went to actually post it on Amazon, it was fascinating because I couldn't figure out how to characterize it. How do you actually
Mm.
put a category? I mean, it's
Hmm.
really difficult. I mean, I would have described it as music fiction, but there is no music fiction category on
Right.
Amazon, and they have lots of them, I assure you. And so I went looking for different categories, and finally, one of the categories I put it in was 1960s history of the US, which is close enough as far as I was concerned, even though it was also nonfiction. The funny thing about that is, within 18 hours of my posting it on Amazon, it became an Amazon bestseller, a number one new release, and is still a number one new release, and it's 4 weeks later. Is that weird? But the funny thing about all of it is that um, that one is, more than any book I've probably ever written, is the one that mostly comes out of my subconscious, because part of the story, most of the story is about a 1960s band, but it also has ripple effects because there are vignettes after the story of the band about people who actually hear the song years later at a time in their life when it's very traumatic for them and very difficult. And so they take comfort from the song, and they take strength and inspiration from it. And what's fascinating is at least two of the three vignettes that I discuss in there, I didn't even realize for the longest time were things I already knew had happened. Isn't that strange?
Hmm.
And it sounds ridiculous, but again, I was writing like a lunatic, because that's what you do in NaNoWriMo. You don't have time to change it. You don't have time to think about it. You just put it down. And then when I put it down and I looked at it later, I thought, this feels right. It does. And it's in fact, there's one of the stories in there deals with something that someone I know here in my town told me, and it just haunted me for years. When my son was in middle school, he had a number of assistant principals, as well as the principal of his school. And on New Year's Eve, one of the assistant principals, who was 32 years old, jumped off the bridge in
Wow.
our town. And it was horrible. It was just no one knew why she'd done it. It was such a trauma for the kids. They had to bring in grief counselors. It was awful. And then some weeks after that, this friend of mine who told me the story told me that he had spoken to a woman who told him she had been walking the bridge that night. We have bike lanes and walk lanes and all this kind of thing, so you can do that, and it's really nice. And she saw a woman there who looked like she was stretching before a run, you know? And this woman who's, very happy because it's New Year's Eve and she's happy to be walking the bridge, she waves at her and she says, "Be careful now, don't jump." And she just kept walking. And she never thought about it. And when she found out what this woman had done, and she thought it was possible that that might have been the woman she had seen, and that she might have been the last person to speak to her, and that that might have pushed her over the edge, it made her feel so horrible. I mean, as bad as you can feel, just terrible. Inadvertently doing something that cost someone their life. Terrible, terrible. And anyway, the woman went on with her story, and she said that some weeks later, she'd been walking the bridge again, and she saw this woman, and something didn't feel right to her. It
Mm.
just something, just the spidey senses started tingling. And she stopped and she said to this woman, "Are you all right?" And the woman refused to talk to her, engage with her, wouldn't look at her, nothing. And she said to her again, "Are you all right?" And again, no response, no nothing. And she said, "Listen, I'm not leaving. Something really bad happened here a while ago, and I don't want it to happen again. And I'm not going until I'm sure that you're going to be okay." Well, she stood with this woman for a while, and then a police car came along. She flagged it down, and the police officer came to the woman and said, "Hey, let's take you downtown. Let's find out how everything is." And the woman went with him. And a few hours later, the police officer called the woman who had been walking on the bridge and said, "We just want you to know that we spoke to this woman finally. She was able to open up to us, and she told us that if not for you, she would have jumped."
Wow.
And that was just, I mean, that was a story that has stayed with me for such a long time. I recently told the person who had originally told me the story about that, and he remembered it, but he didn't remember he had told it to me. And I remember saying to him that it was just, it had such a profound effect on me. I had thought about it for such a long time, but that actually went into scenes from a song, almost exactly the way I told it to you. And things like that stay with you for such a long time, and I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but they're the kinds of things that um, they stay with you and they don't go away until you do something about them. And once you've done something about them, I feel like you can put them to rest a little bit, and I
Hmm.
think that feels better.
Yeah, I agree completely. And there, by the way, just so you know, Susan, there are no wrong answers. There are no long answers and there are no wrong answers on this show.
Thank you.
So yeah, no, I think it's a profound story, and I am grateful that you told it. And it's one of those life lessons that we just don't know the effect we have on people sometimes,
Yeah, true.
and we don't know until sometimes ever, or sometimes we don't know until way later when someone sort of lets us know. And it was really nice of the police to make that phone call. But yeah, you have no idea. And I've been told some of the work that I've done by people who who have said things like, you found me when my life was in the balance. It was hanging in the balance, and because of being, talking with you or reading your work, things shifted for me. And so we have no idea what we're going to do. And I would love to ask you about sort of the overall goal for you, because it sounds to me, and you can obviously correct me if I'm wrong, that that's part of it for you, is to help lighten people's load a little bit. That feels to me like what your work does. But what is your goal with your work?
Thank you for asking that. That is a wonderful question. Um, People would ask me that for a long time, and I used to say, "Oh, rich, famous, etc." That's really not the case. I'm at a point in my life where this is all I want to be able to do. In
Mm,
fact, I have visions. This is probably not true, but I have visions of Agatha Christie finishing one book and typing the end on her typewriter, rolling out that page from her typewriter and putting in a new one and starting the next one right there.
mm,
No, and she was so unbelievably prolific, and that is what she did. She wrote short stories, she wrote plays, she wrote, those marvelous novels, and they were so wonderful, and people are still reading them and whatever. It's so great. The goal for me is, and I think I'm going to quote Latin here. There's one of the very few Latin phrases I actually know: "Sursum corda, lift up your heart,"
mm.
which I would very much like to feel as though my stories lift up people's hearts, lighten their loads, as you said, make them feel better, make them feel, maybe I'm not on the wrong track, maybe I'm on the right track, maybe I'm just taking a little bit longer to get there, kind of thing. The more you go on in life, the more clear it becomes that every one of us is on this planet to serve everybody else. And it's just a matter of finding out how effectively and how you most effectively can serve everybody else. And my feeling is if I can give someone a song lyric, a story, um, just something to kind of remind them that things are good or can be good, then I think that that will help. I have never, very fortunately, thank you, very fortunately, I've never had the um, opportunity to help someone through a situation that, is like a life or death situation. But I would like to hope that maybe something I write will reach someone at a moment when they have to think about, is this going to matter and should I stick around? And the answer emphatically is absolutely, it does, and you should, and you will, and you do. So to be able to bring that to someone, um, and again, to just be able to do this all the time for a living and nothing else and not have to think about anything else, that to me would be glorious and heavenly. And maybe the fact that I think of it as glorious and heavenly pushes it further out for me rather than becoming a tangible goal. But that's what I would like most. People saying, "Oh my God, I love her work. I love her stories and I reread her stuff all the time." I would love that.
Oh, that's so lovely. I think that's a beautiful goal on both sort of facets of it, sort of for you personally, but also the almost conversation you're having with your readers. Obviously nonverbal, but still conversation that you're having with your readers as you create the work and they share it. I'm Susan. This has been so much fun. I could probably keep you here for like another 6 hours, but I won't because I know you have a day to get back to. If somebody wants to know more about your work I don't know if you're on social media, we didn't talk about that. But if somebody wants to know more about Susan Sloate and where they can find you and your work, where should they go?
Well, the best place to go and the most information in one place about me is at my website, which is www.susansloate.com, SUSANSLOATE.com. I also am on X. I really lurk there more than I post there, but I'm on X. I have a little bit of presence on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook as Susan underscore Sloate. And you can find my page there for my books as well as my personal page. But mostly, like I say, the website has all the new stuff that I'm doing, all the interesting stuff that's coming up. There's a little bit about, just a little paragraph about the fact that I'm working on the musical now because there's so much more to do and I have so much more that I have to be thinking about. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. And if you're listening to this, you know I ask people to give that information, but I also put it in the show notes because I know people learn differently. So if you want the links to those, you can also go to the show notes and find them there. All right, Susan, thank you so much for that. And I have two more questions that I ask everybody who comes on the show. And there's, as I said to you before we started recording, they're silly questions, but I find that they can yield some profound answers.
Sure.
All right, here's question number one. What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? And I don't mean your alarm.
Whatever the story is that's nagging at me at that particular moment. Oh, come on, you've got a scene to write. You know you can get it done. Get your butt out of bed. That's pretty much it.
I love that. Usually for me, it's my cat sitting on my head. One of my three cats sitting on my head. But
That'll
uh,
do it.
yeah, it will. But yeah, it's an interesting thing when you've got cats who are going, wow, you haven't fed me in the last 2 hours. Wow, we're very
Oh,
starving. Can't you tell? That sort of thing.
oh
Uh,
my.
and my husband sleeps very late. He's a night owl, so he's never going to wake up and feed them. So it's always up to me.
Uh,
Alrighty, the last question, as I said, it's silly, but it yields profound answers. And the question is this: if you had an airplane, environmentally friendly, of course, that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
Surrender, Susan.
Is that like Surrender Dorothy?
Yes, that's exactly what I thought of. Yeah, that's. I mean, the worst thing is I think in terms of movies more than anything. And in fact, my family actually has something weird where we pretty much talk in movie dialogue.
Mm,
My two sons talk to each other in movie dialogue all the time because I've been putting movies on for them since the time they were about two.
I love it.
That's what they know. So there you are. That's pretty much it. I'm not sure what I would if I could skywrite anything because I've never thought of writing anything that was actually going to cover that amount of acreage, ever. I've never thought about that particularly. I'm just hoping that the words that I put out there, whether they're small or not, can be mighty enough to reach someone and change someone's life. That would be lovely.
All right. Well, that sounds like a really worthy goal. That's fabulous. Susan, thank you so much for being on the show. What a pleasure to get to know you and to get to know more about your work.
It's been a joy, Isolde. I really appreciate this. This is wonderful. Hope the time will come I'll be able to come back, but thank you very, very much. It's been terrific.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, and you're welcome back anytime. We'll talk about that later. So,
Wonderful.
if you have been listening to this episode, you know you need to go to susansloate.com and find out more about her work as a storyteller and as a musical creator, which, as I said, is catnip to me. This is Isolde for the Your Creative Mind podcast, reminding you, as always, to be curious, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2025. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.